Hey, we're back. Katherine Albrecht and Greg Nikolettos joining you to talk about the singularity. What is it to be human, and what is coming down the pike? Now, Greg and I both have worked for a number of years fighting against the implantation of microchips into human beings. I've also expanded that work into fighting the implantation of microchips into animals because we discovered that research showing that between 1 and, even 10% of laboratory animals implanted with these implantable microchips develop cancer around the chip. We now know that dogs and cats are developing microchip-induced cancers, disabilities, paralysis, all kinds of problems. We know the dogs have bled to death from these microchip implants. So I oppose them pretty much across the board, not only for medical reasons, though, but because I believe that they're just inherently wrong. So I want to get to that in just a moment. We do have the phone lines open if you have a question or a comment about the film Transcendent Man, the ideas of Ray Kurzweil, the idea that by 2045 we will become immortal if we choose to merge with technology. And if you'd like to weigh in on any of that, 1-800-259-9231 or KMA@spychips.com is the email address. Let's go ahead and go to Texas and say good afternoon to Joe. Joe, hello. You are on with Greg Nikolettos and Katherine Albrecht. Go right ahead.
Well, hello. Good afternoon to y'all. I was going to talk about maybe when you talk about cloning or just a recreation of a human. In both cases, I find it extremely odd that you just never be able to bond that soul. I mean, you literally have to bond that soul with that body again, and it just sounds absurd to me.
So you're talking about Ray Kurzweil's idea that he was going to, quote, bring back my father, this kind of an idea that he would save some genetic material from his dad and then just sort of recreate him from scratch?
Yes, I mean, there's no possible way that he could relive every bit of event that was happening in his life to make him the person that he was. That was if you were cloned from a infant to a whatever age he's talking about. Or let me
let Greg jump in on this. Greg, isn't his idea that
Joe
somehow
Joe brings up a very valid point, because at the end of the day, where Ray Kurzweil is going, his utopia is where we actually move into nanobots that actually start replacing our blood cells, which then, similar to the Matrix movie, where Neo can then obviously go download a program that can fight the new virus that's coming through. So basically building human beings that are have an immune system that is 100% bulletproof. We can obviously fight off diseases. There is no heart attacks. Now, when you actually look at Ray Kurzweil's father, he was, you could call him a musical genius in a sense, but also a man that was riddled with disease. He had heart disease. But ultimately, that's what made, Ray Kurzweil's dad his dad. I mean, my dad had a heart attack as well, and I saw, the gentleman himself changing in front of me. But at the end of the day, that was the sum of my experience with my father. So I totally agree with you, Joe. I think, what makes you is the sum of your life experiences, how you deal with them. And it's not a case of if we now recreate someone and we make them perfect, as what Ray is proposing, he wouldn't have his father. It would be a clone that basically belongs to, a collective of the hive mind.
Well, part of it, too, though, and I know it's not just Ray Kurzweil, but it's a bunch of these guys. I'm thinking of Peter Cochran specifically, who actually talks about his own father and how he would have loved to have had a way to download the contents of his father's brain before he died. And so it's sort of the idea that there would be some kind of a storage mechanism inside of our brains. And didn't IBM or didn't somebody come up with this thing that you'd wear around your neck, Greg? Do you remember that? That was like this life-capturing machine that would actually record all of your experiences as well?
Box, I think it was called the Soul Catcher. That was actually by British Telecom. That was proposed that it basically would capture every, thought process, every movement, and, where your entire life would basically be able to be viewed, in 3D, with just downloading. And then obviously, that downloading could then be passed to the next generation, so your next generation could totally understand you. That's if they had the time to obviously view your whole life. That's another question. But look, these theories have so many holes in them, and quite often I see them as being a Trojan horse in a sense of what I want to see, which is a question I proposed to, one of the guys that actually is in Transcendent Men, Ben Kurzweil, when I said to him, well, why don't you start with the brain upload? Why can't we see all your people who are so fanatical about this particular movement? I would like to see some action. So even though I don't agree with, somebody uploading their mind regardless, I mean, from my moral and ethical position, at the end of the day, very few of them are doing anything, if anything at all.
Then we got to get into Peter Warwick, though. Professor Peter Warwick, who actually has become the cyborg and implanted all this creepy stuff. Hey, Joe, want to thank you for the call. Want to keep, the phone lines are still open, 1-800-259-9231. Let's go to Texas and say hello to Robert. Hi, Robert. You're on with Greg Nikolettos, and I'm Katherine Albrecht. Go right ahead.
Well, hi, Catherine. I recently graduated from college, and one of the discussions we had and some papers we had to write was on artificial intelligence. And in my study, I had a couple of guys on a team that were semi-religious, knew a little bit about the Bible, and so I just, the class didn't like it, but I just tried to develop a concept that the Bible actually talks about this. In Genesis 11:6, of course, we have the statement with respect to the development of the Tower of Babel in the city, that God says that if nothing is done, that there's nothing that's going to restrain man in his imagination and what he will do. And then in Revelation 18, we have this list given that spells out all the raw ingredients that are used by the beast and the woman riding the beast, and at the very end of the list, of course, is the statement that there is with gold, the great big long list, and then the souls of men. And so humanity is
having essentially engorged on the blood of men and the souls of men. I mean, there's like this horrible passage in there about that. Yeah,
right. But, so these are like bookends. These two passages that spell out how mankind, under the influence of the demons, that are trying to, even with special knowledge they have, to motivate mankind to take us in a direction that will break the prophecies of God and force a failure in God's big plan any way possible.
Well, and I think Greg would certainly agree that there are enormous biblical parallels to a lot of the stuff going on. Greg?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I can tell you, Ray Kurzweil, the difference between having a God figure in his belief system, he believes in the robot culture, so he terms them, the robot overlords. So he says, when the robot overlords are here, will you be prepared? And I think to myself, it's really just taking the template of Christianity from a from a scientific perspective, and then making it fit into his frame, into his world, and to the way he basically chooses to put the jigsaw puzzle together. So to me, having a robot overlord, basically, when strong artificial intelligence does arrive, hypothetically, and let's say these machines can obviously outperform and outthink man, Professor Hugo de Harris, who's probably one of the only people that actually sees the flip side to this.
Hold that thought one sec on your professor. I want to come right back to that in just a moment. We do have the phone lines open, 1-800-259-9231, KMA at Spychips.com for your email. Stay tuned.